person in the group, so I don't think they're very.
Ron, you show up as being here, but can you hear us? We cannot hear you. I think there's something that needs to...
Now, can you hear us? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Terrific.
I will, I don't know what happened to my laptop. I'm rebooting it. So while that reboots, hopefully I'll join normally, but I'm doing it off my phone right now.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. So I don't know where Michael Harry is right now. He indicated he was going to be here. I know that Janet Murphy's not coming. And she was on this committee, I think, primarily because of the role of the town clerk in administering town meetings, and particularly getting voters in and out of the room, whatever room that happens to be. But I think that her interests will be pretty well represented by the time being. I don't know if everybody knows everybody else. We've had some very limited introductions. But why don't we go around the table or around the room? I'm Rip Hastings, moderator. This meeting was convened by the town meeting at my suggestion, and I think also with the support from John McDonald, select board member. Encouraged to see whether we can make town meeting a more engaging, responsive, satisfactory artifact of our community. So that's me. Let me go.
I'm Beth Nolan. I'm a lawyer in town, but I also was the last volunteer town clerk for the town of Weston. I served as town clerk for 17 years. So,
my name is John Sally. My wife and I have lived in town for 36 years and raised our kids here. And in that time, I've been involved in a number of, Weston groups like Boy Scouts, St. Peter's Church, but also involved the town activities as a member of the finance committee and a one-time chair of the Josiah Smith Tavern Library Committee, the board of the Weston Historical Society, a few other things. So,
a lot of me is healed from.
Yeah, so I have a strong interest in Weston and its prosperity.
I'm Ann Gunning. I've lived in town for 31 years, I think. I've done everything from coaching soccer and currently on the tree advisory board. I was on the rail trail committee. So done a lot of outdoor things in Weston.
Now an indoor thing.
Now an indoor thing.
Or an outdoor thing. We could decide that, that might be a recommendation.
I'm Tom McDonald. I also have lived here for 31 years and I've been on the finance committee and now I'm on the select board. And I also have 3 children who went through all the schools here.
I'm going to amend something. I've lived here for 50 years.
Whoa.
And the 2 kids went through all the schools.
How about you, Ron?
Hi, I'm Ron Malore. I have lived in Weston, I would say 14 years now. This is the first committee that I've joined, so hope to participate more in the town going forward. My background is in IT, which I think is what excited Rip over here and said, oh, you should definitely join this committee.
Yeah, Ron has a strong background in IT and in, I think, some familiarity with the security aspects of IT, which is a pertinent issue in connection with remote participation in town meeting, which is at least one of the topics that we're going to be discussing. I have another, the other Ron Malore is joining the meeting now, Ron.
Yeah, you may have echo problems here, but I'll fix it in a second.
Thank you. But still no Michael Harity, who has served on the select board in the past. Also served on one of the Josiah Smith Tavern or town old library committees. I believe recommended many years ago that we not build the building in which we're in right now, but that we move half of town hall's operations over to the old library. We didn't do that. And Michael was a member of the town governance study committee and looked into we started to look into some of this town meeting stuff on that committee. I was hoping that Michael would be here because I was kind of hoping to Shanghai him into being the chair of this committee. But that might not be a great idea. So do we want to go around the room? Well, I suppose that I could be the chair of the committee. I don't have a vote on the committee.
That makes it even better.
Yeah, I do think that makes it fun.
The other non-voting member of the committee who's present today would be John McDonald.
Well, I nominate Rick. Do I hear a second?
Oh, this is a big problem. I really screwed this up.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I agree.
Thank you all for your,
Thank you.
for your support. Okay, well, I brought a couple of extra copies of the warrant for town meeting, which contains the scope, contains the charge for our committee. And I got sent along to everybody on the committee helpful links, which included, I think, the charge, some Concord materials, links to some prior Weston materials, all of that linked material is available on the website of either the town of Weston or the town of Concord. And included in Concord website is are links to all of the material that they developed in evaluating what other communities were doing or had done in the fairly recent past. It's a pretty comprehensive assessment. And I'm personally hopeful that this committee will not have to sort of reinvent all of that effort. And it will depend a little bit on whether folks are comfortable with the adequacy of the work that Concord did in some respects. So I encourage you all to take a look at that stuff. In particular, any piece of it that strikes your fancy or particularly interests you. But I would particularly recommend their overall report. And although it was a little bit self-indulgent, there's a report which are reflections by the person who chairs that committee. Basically spent, I think it was a job for him from May until probably December or January, about a 6 or 7 month effort. They did a lot of work, and his reflections are also very helpful about what their overall findings were and what they thought that they accomplished. Maybe it would be helpful to go around and see if any of you have any particular angles, insights, or objectives in connection with this committee, what you hope it will accomplish. Does anybody want to jump in on that?
Sure, I will.
Okay, John.
My objective is to dramatically increase the percentage of town residents who participate in town meeting. I think having 3 to 6% and at most 10 people attending town meeting, which vote on, all the major issues in town is not representative of the town. And I'm also very interested, as Rick knows, in remote participation. So I see that as a way to perhaps increase participation in town meeting. Those are my goals.
Well, so I read some of these reports, and a couple of the reports I thought were very interesting, especially about how you do remote participation. And I am a firm believer that town meeting is the highest form of democracy. And seeing the elections being in the town since 1976, I see the ebb and flow of voters. It's always the same. It depends on, just like with any other election, what is the issue? It's hard enough to get it's hard to get volunteers. We're a volunteer government. But people come out when it's something that affects them. A large question, this is a veteran community. They really don't care. So I think it's very hard to get more active participation than 10%. Were you here, John, in the 90s when there was the big meeting run by the selectmen and another group on how do we increase participation? It was held at the gym in the high school, and it was packed. And people had all these ideas, but they all fell by the wayside because just clicked. People didn't want Saturdays. People wanted Saturdays, but yes, I want Saturdays, but I have my kids. I go to bed early. It's difficult. So I'm coming from an idea that I do believe town meeting participation is the highest form of democracy. And when I read some of these reports in here, including the report from the town, what group was it? 2018, they went through how to do remote participation. And the advisory group said, there are issues, but should people actually you can listen, but how are you going to control the vote if it's remote participation? I think that's going to be a difficult thing. They talk about, can you have one area, say Brook School, for having people come remote, or do you want people to do it in their bedrooms? How are you going to police that? I think that could be an issue for just voter security. It's one thing if you can send in questions, but I don't know about voting remotely. I mean, that's one of my hangups. When I read.
Did you watch?
Well,
Did you watch the? By the way, the links that you sent I thought were extraordinarily
very
helpful. And I would point to three things in particular that any of you, if you haven't already looked at all of that stuff, the three things I found most particularly helpful were the Massachusetts Moderator Association report, which you sent as a PDF. The second thing was the main report that Concord did. I mean, if you go to the Concord website, they've got like the minutes of all those like 100 meetings and stuff, which I did not look at, but I read the main report and I found that very helpful. And then I'm trying to think what the third thing the third thing I found really helpful was the 2015 report from the last time there was a study that was done. And then I would say actually the fourth thing you have to read, which is the results of the town manager, the town meeting survey that you've organized that had the 259 respondents. I wasn't able to do the crosstabs because I think I asked you about trying to get access to the sheets.
Yeah.
So we can
difficulty.
we can get to that at some point, but just reading the top line I thought was very helpful. But if you have not already gone to the link that Rick had to the Wayland, not the report itself or the website, but there's a presentation that the League of Women Voters did of that. And the guy who did all the work on all the technology stuff, it addresses almost all of your questions. I'm not saying it's right or that we should do that, but that will be, if you haven't already watched that would be incredibly.
Yeah, because his name is Dave Bernstein.
Yeah, Dave Bernstein.
And he gave the same presentation to us, and he has gone over all that.
It's totally
computer guy from MIT.
It makes the issue philosophical, not technical.
And probably I'm more philosophical on this. I told Rick from the very beginning that I have a philosophical bent towards town meeting as the highest form of democracy. It's that participation. I'm willing to listen and change. There's no question, but I wanted to let you know that I have to move in some areas.
Right, and his presentation shows how you can do all the things you do at town meeting. You can make a question, you can amend something, every single item that you do at town meeting can be done, online, and it also goes through the moderator.
How about you, Ann?
Yeah.
Let's get,
Well,
you have an angle on this at this point?
an angle, I would like to see participation. I would like to yeah, I would like to see participation increase in some way, for sure. But I agree, it's the highest form of, I mean, it's actually true democracy in action. I just think of democracy in action constructed for an agrarian society. That is not how we live anymore. We are not the same kind of community. We don't have the same restrictions. We're free to move about the country, and people do that. And I'm just not sure how relevant I think the objectives of town meeting and the community aspects of town meeting are still relevant and good. I'm not sure how appropriate the tactics are for 2026 going forward. And I think it behooves us to look at other ways we can engage people in a true democratic process that are available to us now, and that reflect more the way our society is structured and set up.
Got it. How about you, Ron?
Yeah, I read one of the documents, and obviously I gravitated towards some of the IT things. And I felt reading the documents that I read that it was pretty comprehensive. They have considered all the IT issues, including the ones that were raised here around how do you know, authorization, authentication, who's voting, etc. So they've thought about the various concerns well. Now I only focused on that one part, but I think you guys raised the appropriate issue, which is that even if you had home voting, let's say we figure that out, will the participation go up? And so I get your feedback that it's people come and there's an issue that's of interest to them. Otherwise, they drop out. I've been to some of the town meetings. As soon as people have voted on the issue they came for, there's people start leaving.
I think things, so I came into this process sort of coming at it from the same angle that John did, and parallel to what Ann just said, that the having participation of 3 to 5% and having a process that was well suited to 1750, but not maybe so well suited to 2026, needed some significant rethinking. Having read some of this stuff, I think it's more nuanced. And I see a couple of big trade-offs and elements to focus on. One is that of the stuff that you sent around that was very helpful, there's one sort of philosophical thought which is along the lines of what Beth just said, which is this is the highest form of democracy. It served us well for hundreds of years. Having people actually show up and discuss these things in person is, they use the word sacrosanct, that the deliberative process is sacrosanct. And then some other stuff that you also sent around said, talks about how when you have a democracy when only 3 to 5% show up, and the democracy is sacrosanct, because they also use that word, and you do a survey. Your survey, I think, had results very similar to Concord's and other surveys, which is 85% of the people say they already have enough deliberation before they go into this, and 85% say that they don't want to spend all this time, hearing a bunch of, nonsense or relevant stuff, or whatever. That there's a problem with that. And so it strikes me that one of the big trade-offs that we're actually talking about then is democracy and how important that is versus deliberation, and how important that is. And part of the problem with the argument for deliberation, and this is one aspect of all those materials that I don't think was well addressed or ever addressed really, which is that presumption of how important that deliberation is rests on an assumption that people come into this with good knowledge of the issues and good knowledge of the facts and are well prepared for that deliberation and have an attitude of open-mindedness that they want to hear the arguments and want to hear the back and forth debate. And one observation that I would make is, having seen how sausage is made, is that that's a completely stupid assumption.
Yes, they don't go to the meetings ahead of time. They don't treat them.
That they say that when the response to your survey was, I have enough information to make a decision. And what I really don't like is having to come and spend all this time listening to a bunch of blather in order to register my vote. That's kind of what the bottom line of it is. And my reaction, having been on the finance committee and having watched finance committee presentations, having read finance committee reports, having actually been involved in writing finance committee reports, is not even the finance committee does a very good job of, getting to the bottom of some of these issues. And that's just financial issues, not the water tank issues. We had 3 votes on the water tank because the first vote was completely silly, and it was just bad work that was done to that. And now after 3 more votes and a select board that spent a year and a half actually meeting on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to get to the bottom of it, I think we have a good plan. But if we had actually voted on that first vote, we would have a bad plan and that's the people who knew about the plan, not to mention all the people who were sitting in the town meeting who had no idea that the staff work that was done was inadequate. So we have this democracy versus deliberation, but we also, if we're going to go, I actually think that if we're going to go down the path of we need to maintain the deliberation as opposed to swing the balance toward democracy, we have to do something to improve on that assumption of people know what the issues are, that the staff work has been done correctly, the analysis has been done correctly, and the debate has been full. And it's just not now. So that's.
But how do you propose that would work? There was
that's a whole
deliberation one day, and then everyone just comes in and votes the next.
Well, that's the Australian. I mean, that's one way. That's one way to do it. That's one. Another way to do it is, something that uses technology more fully. But we can talk about the how. But I was trying to deal with the philosophical issue.
There's other things behind the deliberation too. I think sometimes I'm stunned by the lack of respect of people in town for work done by committees and people in town. So it may be that the work that they're right to question the work of a committee, but sometimes I just want to like, were you listening? Because we said that. So it goes both ways. I heard some pretty rude comments made in town meeting about presentations that people have made, or just, question. I don't know. I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know about like a rotary design, but I sort of at some point have to put my faith in the committee working on it and the people they hired to live through the town center project, because I live right in the center of town and I know that mistakes were made by the consultants. So there's a whole thing there, I think, about expertise, the quality of the information that's being presented, that I think is part of this discussion.
I agree.
How do we trust the quality of the work?
But that's when people stand up and say, I'm an expert on this. And there are experts that will say, and they'll.
But sometimes they say, I'm a psychology professor at Tufts, and so let me tell you why this is not appropriate as to the scientific question. I'm like,
yeah. Well, that's the bit. I mean, but that's true in life generally, which is you get information and you have to decide or discern for yourself. Is this good information or is this absolutely nonsensical information?
You talk about people being frustrated at the length of town meeting, though. It's a lot of that.
Well,
There's you're touching on all of these things are ones that are reflected in all of the other reports that all the other communities have done. No community has a level of participation that would satisfy John or probably any of us. It is what it is. And probably if we went back to, the 1780s, or maybe even earlier, we might find that the percentage of participation was just as, as terrible as it is now back then.
Yeah.
The numbers were smaller, but the participation rates were every bit as low.
Yeah.
Certainly, if you took into consideration the people who didn't actually own property weren't white males and didn't even have a say in what was going on back then. But to try to sort of wrap together some of these themes, there's a trust is an enormous issue, and do people trust the output of town government, whether it's what happens at town meeting, whether it's what the select board proposes or the planning board? I mean, to a certain extent, as Ann was saying, we don't have a lot of respect for the work that has been done by boards and committees, but that's sometimes we don't have that kind of respect. For the most part, the town's budget gets passed just like that. And what does that reflect? That reflects an awful lot of confidence in the select board who proposed the budget. We just say, yeah, or we can't get into the weeds, or maybe the finance committee isn't doing as thorough a job or the job that I would do in sort of digging into, analyzing, and finding the weaknesses in what's being proposed now and suggesting alternatives. But for the town meeting part of it, that's kind of that's the decider in New England. And it's one of those things that New England did that it wasn't really able to export very effectively. Nobody anywhere in the United States of America does this except communities in New England. And some of us are falling off the wagon a little bit. The town of Amherst reorganized itself as a city council, and they have 11 councilors, I believe, and they make all the decisions. Nobody else has a say. Nobody else has a vote. Nobody else has a right to speak in their deliberations. So that's a different way to go if we wanted to, probably, I guess in my mind, disenfranchise a larger percentage of the population than we do even in Weston.
But they elect the councilors.
Well, I know, but we elect the select board.
Right, it's the same thing. You can look at Wellesley, which is Reading, they're all representative town meeting. But the representatives are people that, have a particular hair across their nose that they want to stand up and talk. We're too small of a town, I think, to do representative town people. Because I think it's have the same people. And I just can't see how representative town meeting would work. And that would be more apt for Weston than having council.
Well, we could look at that. We're big enough to have a representative town meeting. If we were under 10,000 voters, you can't have a representative town meeting.
By state law.
State law.
Oh.
Yeah,
It's 6,000.
is it 6?
I think we are. I think we are large enough.
We're definitely large enough to have.
Yeah.
We're representative, but everything I read in
You're right. You're right.
is I don't think Weston wants a representative company. I don't think we should spend a lot of time on that. But we probably have a lot of readings.
So you want to check that one off already?
Almost. I mean, actually, one thing I wanted to raise is that, this gets to the process of how we want to run, ourselves here for the next several months. It seems like a step one ought to be kind of laying out what the issues are and what some of the pro and con arguments for different things are. Because again, there's so much work that's been done. If we could get AI to synthesize the Concord Town Report, the Wayland stuff, the Mass Moderators Association stuff, and the stuff that was done in 2015, into here are the issues and here are the pros and cons of each side of that argument, I think we'd be like 80% done probably. And then it's a matter of we can have the discussion here about, well, how do we feel about this versus that, or these technology issues or whatever. And then to the extent that there are some things that others in those places have not really addressed as fully, or that we want to dig deeper in, like some of these technology issues, then we can do some more staff work ourselves.
And both Concord and Wayland have, asked the legislature to allow them to do remote voting. And that passed at their town meetings.
Yeah, the Wayland one though, I think that HR 2274 or whatever the number is got tabled this legislative session.
Oh, yeah, the legislature hasn't moved ahead on either.
But
Wayland's done it a couple of times.
But one of the things that they said was that they had asked to actually be allowed to do it for everybody in Massachusetts to do it. And maybe the angle would be to ask for permission to do it on a pilot basis as a test, and that way
Yeah, that was proposed actually, but it was tabled.
that was tabled.
It was going to be 5 communities.
Oh, okay.
Two of which were the ones who already passed it, which were Wayland and Concord. And then the next 3 would be the next 3 communities in order that also passed the request at town meeting. But yeah, the legislature wouldn't, getting the legislature to do stuff is very difficult.
So there are, I think that's a great idea, John. Can you make that happen?
The AI part?
Yeah.
No,
I don't know how to
I
do
haven't
that.
hard enough time with the natural intelligence level. Yeah,
But Ron can.
yeah, he could, right.
You're muted.
You're muted.
You're intentionally muted, aren't you?
He's intentionally muted.
I actually thought of that same thing when I was reading it and saying, God, these are all good issues. I'm never going to remember it all. I wonder if I could get this summarized somewhere. And then I was planning on doing it old-fashioned way, taking notes and saying, here's all the issues and see if there's anything new I thought about. But I think I could take a shot at the AI. I actually, and I have to be careful, but we can feed it in and get and summarize it for you if that's what you want. Here's the pros and cons, and at least we'll see if there's anything we missed. If not, we'll say, yep, it's covered everything. Let's move forward from here.
Terrific. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm glad I showed up.
We are too.
We're glad.
By the way, we're recording this meeting and using, I think, Zoom's AI companion to generate some meeting notes. Something I've never done before, but fingers crossed the magic will happen. Yeah, so
It's actually a good idea. It does a pretty good job, and then you can edit it and then publish it. Simplifies your job.
yeah, we touched using the Concord experience as a little bit of a rubric for looking at some of this. They sort of identified the objectives to provide for a fair, full, and efficient decision making by the part of the town that has the responsibility to make those decisions. They made short shrift of the possibility of doing town meeting differently, representative town meeting, or an Australian ballot type of town meeting. They invested a lot of effort into looking into how do you meet the voters where they are, how you prepare the voters to participate as citizen legislators on those issues where it matters and where more information would make them better at that and make the deliberations actually more constructive. They also observed that they didn't put a percentage on it, but I would say 75% of the things that get dealt with at town meeting are routine, don't require a lot of conversation, should go faster and faster. We are remarkably, I know that some people will disagree with this, but we are remarkably efficient in Weston. Nobody else is having one-night town meetings.
We used to have 3 nights.
Right? The town of Belmont, I think, which is a representative town meeting, has a 6-night town meeting. Lexington goes 5 or 6 nights.
Reading goes as representative, they go a long time.
Yep. Concord goes generally 3 nights in an open town meeting. Wayland generally goes at least 2 nights in an open town meeting. So I think that we have the efficiency question. There's not a lot of, I don't think, a lot of room to improve there. We have fairly limited speaking times, and the moderator could do a better job of managing that stuff. We allow presentations to go on for longer than that, but in some communities, even the presentations are limited to 2 or 3 minutes. I've been in North Andover where they run through in an open town meeting with 2 or 3,000 people. They run through the town budget, and it's almost like watching a movie. The pages flash by like that while somebody's just talking over it, and they count that as a presentation of the budget. I don't know why they
And
bought
it still takes more than one meeting there.
Andover
So I mean, what do they do for the whole 3 days, or 2 days?
Well, North Andover, open town meeting, they have a fair amount of discussion on some topics.
Huh.
I mean, it really depends. People are more willing to call a question in Weston, I think, than they are in other communities. Um, it's all a balance, and how the community balances the fundamental objectives of a fair discussion, a full discussion, and an efficient discussion.
We really bog down, I think, on issues that are either have an emotional component or are nice to have. Or in some people's minds are nice to have. The budget,
People,
I just look at the budget. Like I don't know enough behind these numbers, but people can lock in on things like, do we really need that? Is it really, do we really have to have that? And then you have the people who really want it and the people who probably are just opposed to spending usually money thing. But that's where it's a subset of questions that come before town meeting that I think cause most of the frustration.
not the budget.
No.
But I only remember one time when the whole town meeting, Kenny Eisner stood up and asked about the budget, about whether or not for DPW, did they think about buying a reconditioned street sweeper? And no one could answer that. So people said, well, I don't want to put on the budget until we have that answer. So it was continued until that Wednesday.
Oh.
And DPW Johnny Ryan at the time got up and said, yeah, it's more expensive to do a recondition. I mean, but that was the only time the budget went down. People didn't ask questions.
One of the benefits of, I'm not saying I'm a proponent of this Australian approach, but one of the benefits of that is you can have kind of an ongoing discussion. The deliberation doesn't have to be limited to the 10 or 15 minutes we wanted to vote to this warrant article this evening. You can have that discussion over a period of 2 or 3 weeks. The other is that, I mean, I think this idea of you have to show up at Weston High School at a specific time on a specific night, it doesn't work for people. I have this sense that, and another dimension of this is I have the sense that the answer to this may be stepwise, that rather than saying we want to go this direction, we want to go this direction, that if we agree on, we want to have deliberation, and we also want to have much greater participation based on much better deliberation, based on much better information, that ultimately you end up doing something that's kind of like an Australian approach, but heavy tech orientation. And that the way to get there, kind of testing our way along, is something like enhancing the tech component of it. And then once you see it over a period of 3 or 4 years, because again, if you watch that, it's a League of Women Voters presentation by the moderator and Scott Bernstein from Wayland of everything that they looked at. I came away with the way they present it, and the impression that leaves you is it's really no different from what we do now with clickers in the meeting. It's just that some of the people are sitting in the auditorium and some of the people are sitting in the living room. That's the only difference.
So if you really want to see how that works in real life, you can go to the town of Plymouth and look at a recording of one of their town meetings. They're a representative town meeting. I think they have 190 town meeting members, and as many as a dozen are participating remotely.
Yeah.
And you can see how it looks and how it works and how it feels. And
yeah, and that would be worthwhile for us to explore. But what I think the point that I was trying to make is that strikes me as a relatively incremental step towards, once you have that and you enable people to participate from their kitchen table or their living room or whatever, the next step is to figure out how to enhance the true deliberation component, how to get better information, how to have a better debate, how to let it happen over time so that people can have the back and forth that people have to have in a 3-hour meeting, but there's just not time to do that with 28 warrant articles in a 3-hour meeting.
This goes to the voter preparation question, and it flies a little bit in the face of the survey results that say I have all the information I need.
Well,
And I want to say Concord, for example, in advance of their meeting, they have 3 information sessions where each warrant article gets airtime. One on finances, one on planning, one on other stuff. And each warrant article gets airtime and people can participate in a discussion about it. People can ask questions, have their questions answered. It's not a meeting. It's not a deliberative event, so that people aren't making a decision there, and you can be more flexible about participation.
but here's the concern. This is where we have to be a little bit careful about how we interpret the survey results. You know, it's the 10th anniversary of Brexit, and well, it's 2 weeks ago or last week or whatever. And I saw a British oyster farmer getting interviewed, and Brexit completely put him out of business. Not that like diminished his business, it completely wiped out his business. And the guy from the BBC asked him, well, did you vote for Brexit? Yeah, but we were lied to. And so here's a guy who voted for Brexit and it completely demolished his business. And I think that, and I've observed the same thing, you know, early in my career when I did marketing related stuff, you would send out two surveys and really, you know, scientific market research. And you would ask people, here's a product that we have in mind. Would you buy this product? And 85% of them or whatever would say, yeah, that sounds great. I would buy that. So you spend all this money and you invest all this factory stuff and marketing money and put this product on the market and nobody buys it. And you go to people and say, 85% of you said you would buy this. Why didn't you buy it? Well, I didn't really like it. I was just, you know, I just said that.
Nice.
I
In
was
theory, it sounded
well,
like a good idea.
you know, and so it's the same thing about people say they have enough information, but objectively, do we think they actually have enough information? Or if you provided better information, would you get a better end result? So,
Perfect example is the poor planning board. How many meetings did they have about 3A? They had meetings after meetings, and it goes to town meeting. They have to do it all over again because people never went to the meetings because they.
Well, that was, people were against 3A. It had nothing to
Oh,
do
boy,
with
that
it.
was, yeah, but
You know, it
do you
was to our
think,
advantage not to pass it.
well, that's it. It was voted out because legal at that time,
Yeah.
but that was before the court case.
Yeah.
And so,
but those people, that was a huge town meeting, John. But those numbers weren't at the planning board meetings. It was, people, word of mouth, the small things that they would see. So I thought the planning board did an excellent job with all their meetings. Just like I think the people, they're doing an excellent job with all their meetings. But what's going to happen at town meeting? I don't know. You know, because people will come and they haven't spent, you know, spending the time listening to it. How many people, John, showed up this year for the budget hearings at town hall?
oh, they don't even do them anymore.
They don't.
Even when they did them, nobody showed
Nobody
up.
showed up.
That's right.
Yeah, they just did. I mean, that it was one of those things. So I think there's going to be difficulty because, first of all, you want people to be polite. And how do you say? No negative comments. I don't know. And how do you get people to listen, to deliberate in a timely fashion? You know, I just don't. I'll be interested, and I did not look at the Whalen report, so I just started looking at it.
Just watch there's in the same, right next to the Wayland report link, there's a link to the League of Women Voters presentation. That's the thing to watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you only have to, it also depends who responded to the survey.
Yep.
I mean, this is not we didn't come up with a sample and we didn't make sure that it was representative. We didn't make sure that we had the correct, you know, N of whatever. So you only have the responses you have. from the people who chose to fill it out. You only ever have that. And I mean, yeah, it's true. Even in lesser state situations, I know we've gotten a survey back and had a person say like, I'm not being the person who calls the first meeting and doesn't serve food, even though 90% of our respondents said they would be happy with no food. She's like, they won't be. I just know. So that's part of it. So it's frustrating, but it is it's the only real information you have. You have what you have. So you look at that. So I would suspect maybe the people who cared enough to fill out the survey are also people who care enough to
Go to town meeting.
And to inform themselves in some way. So they do go. And I told Rip when I met with them about this committee, like, I've never once changed my mind at town meeting, not one time. So I think a lot of people who go feel that way.
But if
And that makes it, but probably not about every issue. I mean, you say not once. I can think of a couple of times when I've listened and I've been persuaded differently than I was when I walked into the meeting.
I think having the clicker makes people more likely to change their minds than when you used to stand up. Oh, Joe's behind me.
yeah, right.
Yeah, they're teachers at the back of the auditorium, and they're gonna see how you vote on the
And
school
the
budget.
police are watching me.
And the police are there, yep, looking very stern.
And
Yeah,
it's
so just a comment about democracy in general. I mean, democracy means everybody gets to vote. Some people are uninformed when they cast votes. Some people who vote are stupid, I mean, in my opinion. And some people like this Brexit guy. So, you get what you get.
Uninformed and stupid.
You get what you get in the room. And part of this is about how do we I think that we seem to be agreed that having more participation is a good thing and something that we ought to see as an objective. The barriers to participation are something that we probably should be addressing in some way. Some of those barriers are maybe they're technological, or for certain people they're physical. There may be other barriers for people. I haven't had a request yet for an ADA accommodation, but I can't believe that everybody that comes to the meeting has great hearing. I know for a fact that most of the people in the back of the room can't read what's on the screen because it's just not big enough for people to be able to read and absorb that.
Well, in your survey, I remember reading that, there was a question like, why don't you come to town meeting, or why don't you come to more town meetings? And one of the answers was some sort of disability, and something like 5% of the people answered that. So
Yeah.
there is an issue.
There is an issue there, and
There are also parents of young children, and they're not
Yeah.
going to take them to a room at the high school, and they're not going to hire a babysitter, but they would like to vote on the school budget.
and we have other, barriers to participation or more broader participation, just the physical layout of the spaces that we use. We don't have enough parking at the high school. We had a meeting with about 1,000 people that showed up, and people couldn't find a place to park.
It is honestly one of the reasons I might not go to town meeting. It's because the thought of having to drive to the high school and have to leave so early ahead of time that I get a parking space, if there's not something on there that I really care about, I can't deal with the parking.
Right.
If you had it here, I could walk, to be honest.
And we haven't even talked at all about, language issues. For example, it was brought to my attention that about 20% of the households in Weston, English is not the language that's spoken in that household. And what do we do for people who don't speak English? I think we had one community meeting that was translated by someone into Chinese to accommodate a portion of the population that wasn't really conversant in English. We have a very inhospitable overflow space in the gymnasium where the technology is absolutely deficient. Smaller screen, you can't really see what's going on. The chairs are more uncomfortable and it's not hospitable. So there are other issues that we can look at beyond just how do you get people at the meeting virtually. Is there more that we can do to make?
But isn't that interesting? Because people show up in mass when it's an issue that they really want. That's when you have the overflow.
Well, I wouldn't describe it, 1,000 people as en masse when we have 8,000 registered voters. Yes, it's more than the 3% that show up.
More than 3%. But so there is a question, like how do those, I don't want to call them the special issue, the issue like the water tank, the new DPW thing, the new fire, how do you get people to pay attention to it, to focus on it, to understand that it is a big deal, the condition of our firehouse, the new schools, what causes it to bubble up and get traction in people's minds so that they think it's important enough or outlandish enough in expense or whatever to get them to say like, my vote matters. And I think that's part of it.
There's also this issue, the presumption that if there's a vote that matters, that more people will show up and that's good. I think there's a double-edged sword thing going on because yes, it's good to have more people when there's an important vote. And at the same time, I agree with John's observation that getting 15% of the voters there is better than 3%, but it's not adequate for most of the really big things we vote on. But the thing that I find really troubling is that we get not extraordinarily consequential issues like, are we going to build brand new high school and middle school that would be, or even firehouses, but say for example, this most recent meeting where we had lights, the lights at the high school on that turf field. And, for most everything else on that warrant, the whole warrant book, it was a 3% of the voters kind of a meeting, and 3% of the voters did kind of show up for it. However, the 2% of the people who really, really wanted lights showed up, quote, en masse. So then for that particular warrant article, instead of having 3% of the voters who probably didn't care one way or another, or maybe they would have split 50-50. We had 5% of the voters, 40% of them were passionate about having those lights. Whereas if you actually had some kind of system, whether it was technological or otherwise, where 20% of the people could, without too much trouble, cast their votes, they might say, I really don't want to spend $1 million of town money putting lights on the turf field. So, you could say, well, it's democratic, somebody who cares shows up, but I think we get a lot of weird vote results because of that dynamic that I've just described.
Also, I would tag on to that, which is that sometimes when it's an issue like that and they don't get the 40% who are passionate to hear, they bring it up again and again. And then finally people are like, I can't keep going. and it eventually goes through when people think they voted no and it was settled.
Yeah, there's just lots of secondary issues that sort of need to get addressed. But
some things just take a long time. I mean, we don't, some towns do the deliberative process in the flow of a particular meeting. Sometimes in Weston, we say no at the first meeting, and then we say no at the second meeting. And then the third or fourth time it comes up, maybe we get worn down and we say, okay, enough already. But that's basically how we get the Josiah Smith Tavern and the old library project, or at least 4 tries before.
Or on the other hand, people show up and they say, well, that sounds reasonable enough. Sure, let's go ahead and do that. And then we spend $3 million on the design. And then people say, wait a minute.
Fair enough. I had budgeted about an hour for this meeting, and I don't want to keep anybody beyond what they're expecting here.
Thank you.
But there are a couple of things that we ought to try to sort out before we quit. I mean, Ron already has an assignment. Thank you, Ron. I think that, John, you made a couple of good points about things that would be useful if we all had a kind of a common experience with some of the available materials, so that we have that to sort out, or that is the basis for the conversation. I think it would be helpful if we could come back to another meeting with maybe there are only a couple of them, but maybe the 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 areas that you think that our committee should be investigating. sort of meet the objectives of our charge. Remote participation is obvious. That's easy. They're easy for us, I think, to deal with. And maybe even conceivable that on that topic, we could have a recommendation for a special town meeting in the fall. I understand that the warrant for that November 23 town meeting will probably close the middle of October. If we thought that there was something that the town could or should do in that direction, we could move that quickly. But we don't have to. The Concord group moved pretty quickly and had recommendations for a fall town meeting with respect to the use of clickers, with respect to the use of a consent agenda, and with respect to the use of a briefing book. They had a different approach to providing materials to the voters ahead of the town meeting than what we did. We sort of do something that's a little bit like that, but the print in all of our documents is very hard to read. It's pretty dense, and there's not a lot of back and forth. There's not a lot of the pro and con positions being presented on different issues. Concord adopted a briefing book, and instead of being, this thick, this thick, and the print's bigger. And on any issue, you can see what boards have taken what positions on it, a succinct summary of the pros and cons on the particular issue, kind of like what you get on ballot question in Massachusetts. And it's more material. Most of the people who respond to the survey say they don't need it, but maybe that kind of preparation is something that would be useful. And some of these things that we might think about doing are ones that we could do some consideration by the early fall, in the September timeframe, and maybe have some recommendations. I don't know if we could have recommendations for technology improvements, if any seem warranted. I don't know if we could have recommendations for a more outreach and a more aggressive attempt to have people take advantage of ADA accommodation. When we put something on the warrant book that says, if you require an accommodation, would like to have one considered, please contact the town. I think in my conversations with Leon, there have been maybe 2 such requests that have come up in the last 6 years. And they've come up, a week ahead of the town meeting, which isn't very helpful in trying to set something up. But we could be more proactive about those things. So maybe reading assignments. Is there anything else that anyone has come across in this whole exercise so far beyond the things that John suggested that we all ought to probably read?
If you have the Plymouth, like a link to anything that Plymouth did, you said they've already gone down that path that
Yeah.
we could watch, whether it's a video or anything we could read, that would be helpful.
I can do that.
Yeah.
And Dave Bernstein, who John knows pretty well, I know pretty well, has engaged the moderator down in Plymouth to do a write-up of their experience in representative town meeting as something to supply to legislators in the effort to persuade legislators to move this along. The remote participation for open town meeting is not entirely dead. I understand from a recent conversation with Dave Bernstein that there are 3 bills on the Senate side. They're still sitting there that haven't really been killed yet. They haven't been strangled yet, and that's likely that they will be. But all hope is not lost, and that group, which is now Concord and Wayland, and to a certain extent, Nantucket's moderator is involved, and I've been a little bit involved, as a strategy to go forward in the next legislative session. A new legislative session begins in January, and try to do this over again. There's sort of, I think that the remote participation issue is worth teeing up in a more comprehensive way for us all to talk about it. I mean, I think that everybody comes in with at that issue with a particular perspective and some thoughts already pretty well formed, but maybe to have a meeting, maybe our next meeting, maybe second to next meeting, focused on that issue, maybe getting somebody like Dave Bernstein to show up and talk with us would be useful. How do you folks feel about that? Do you feel that?
I think remote, if we just take it remote participation at this time, but I think the moderator has to be very clear about what the rules are for remote participation. If you're standing in line to speak and someone's on, who has priority?
Yeah, well, I mean,
That's always an issue.
not to steal Dave Bernstein's thunder, but everybody would be interacting with the moderator in the same way, with the same platform, with a device, probably your own device. It's got an app on it. And there's a queue established that is, first in, it's in queue first and so forth. And there are people out of the room, people in the room.
Well,
People want to speak.
if I remember, again, we'll see this on the
Yeah.
video, but the queue is there for everybody to see, but the moderator may decide, well, we've already heard 4 pro points of view. I'm going to jump down to number 8 in the queue. Who's a con?
It's not the pro and the cons. It's remote and in person. I think that's I like that.
I think,
You
again,
just,
yeah, Dave-
you just have to get in a queue
Yeah.
and everyone would just.
but
be in
they
the queue.
again, he watch the, if you
Yeah,
watch
watch
that
it.
video.
And I was wrong for not watching.
No. I mean,
No, but it
it's-
would be very helpful. I think I strongly suspect that Dave Bernstein would be happy to either come or do his presentation and be able to answer questions. Because a lot of those questions you ask are good ones, but he knows the answers to them. And he can tell you, like Rick was saying, well, the moderator does this or that based on it. And the moderator can see all these, because they have thought about all sorts of, different issues that could come up on this standard.
Ron.
That was a test of remote participation. When you say remote participation, you just mean in discussion, right? Not remote voting, correct? Just participation in the deliberation.
No, both.
Okay. All right. I'll be interested in what he says about remote voting. I'll just tell you guys, I'm highly confident, 100% confident that any remote voting system can be hacked and exploited by anyone. The only question is, do they really care about, changing the votes on the lights on the field, right? About putting in the lights, or alternatively, how much more risky is that versus the clicker? That's the only conversation. If you last week heard what Senator Warner said, General Rudd, who was the head of U.S. Cyber Command and NSA, told him that with the new Anthropic Mythos, they were able to break into almost, at least that's what they say in the unclassified, most classified systems within a few hours. Just letting you know, the cost of breaking in is going down very rapidly, and there'll be multiple AI tools all over the world that can do that. So it can be broken in, and the cost of breaking in will go down. And changing the votes or removing votes, whatever it may be, can. And then the question only is, what's the likelihood, the risk, and those are that's really what we would have to think about.
This will be a very interesting conversation between you and Dave. Because he shares your skepticism, but he's optimistic.
Oh, that he's
And
not a good cyber person. Sorry. A good cyber person runs out of, you have to close every door and close it every day because they only need to break in once.
Well, he also feels, maybe this will give you more comfort with him. He feels that actually getting to the point where a pilot project could result in an open town meeting actually utilizing remote participation technology will probably take 3 years of work. And smart people are going to have to be persuaded to spend money on this and develop these applications. And they're going to have to be tested rigorously in advance of ever being used.
Yeah. I won't run this any longer so I won't go there, but I don't think so. I don't think that you need very scarce, highly paid technical resources to manage this and build capability that's defensible and over the long term. And I'm highly skeptical. I'm just giving you my bias on day one, but I'm happy to be proven wrong otherwise. Okay.
His view is that the remote participation can be at least as secure as real-time participation. And I know that there are people who are skeptical about the credentialing process of getting people into town meetings and voting, particularly at the federal level recently. I think there are a lot of people that want voters to be better credentialed than they are. But there are people who could show up at check-in time at our town meeting and say, I'm John Sally at 444 Wellesley Street.
555.
See, I would have gotten caught.
It'll be easier. I will corrupt the database. I will change it. Everyone can vote the way they did. I'm not going to be a fake voter coming in, but the data that's get recorded in the database, the system, the malware I'll put in will change the numbers to what I want it to be.
So we're already screwed, so to speak, using these clickers to vote.
No,
I'm just letting you know. That's reality. And back to likelihood, the risk, how do we want to, those are the conversations that we need to have. Okay?
I really appreciate it. That's good perspective. Thanks.
the clickers is a closed system, so it's very hard to hack from the outside.
Hard, but not impossible.
Not impossible. Well, it's
Well,
not
just
impossible
go back
to
to
hack.
raising the hands.
Yeah, no, but the fact that something's attached to the internet is much more problematic as
Yeah. So let's put remote participation on our agenda for this meeting.
Okay.
And or maybe Ron can have a summary of those materials that we were talking about to kind of focus our discussions going forward. Maybe from each of us, do more reading and think about
what's the Lego of voters thing I wrote.
Yeah. I'll get this out to you guys, but I think you all, we should take a look at it too to make sure it's accurate. LLMs and AI have a way of not summarizing correctly. So I'll take a shot at it. I'll do some reading, but it'll be great if we all read it because and then there'll be some corrections that'll need to get done.
Thank you very much. With what frequency and when do we want to begin continuing these get-togethers? And is it valuable to do this in person, which constrains us a little bit, but
I prefer in person. I just didn't read your PDF correctly. I read it again. How come everyone's there in person? Right there on top, it says upper meeting hall. I just went straight to all those instructions for remote and simply assumed it was remote. Okay.
Well, I think given it's the summer, it's going to be hard to have in-person meetings all the time.
We can
A
do
lot of us
hybrid.
go away. So, I mean, that's why I would argue for Zoom, maybe until the fall, when people are back.
Or we could do hybrid where
Yeah.
those who are in town can participate here. The ones who
Right,
are
just like,
in Connecticut can zoom in.
Fair warning, sometimes I might be on my phone in the parking lot of my local elementary school in Vermont,
mean,
hoping that there's signal.
If we want to try and get something done by, I think the charter is to have a draft by December or something, by December town meeting or the end of December.
the end of December, the draft to the moderator?
I mean, and depending on how much work we want to put into this, it seems like we ought to plan to meet at least bi-weekly, if not weekly. I mean, the Concord guys met every 2 weeks for 9 months.
And that's why I will read that Concord report thoroughly.
Yeah, right. See how
I
much.
trust the people of Concord. You have
Maybe-
done a
maybe-
good job.
But if we only met, 3 times between now and September, I don't see us getting the work done.
No, but maybe, how about let's just concentrate on remote participation.
Yeah,
And if we all read the articles and saw that, did the work, and then we can email questions and what our thoughts are, and then have a meeting just concentrating on everyone's questions about and how we feel about just remote participation, not remote voting, but remote participation. And if we just break it down just one topic at a time. And I think that would get us going, John. I think if we try to do once a week or every 2 weeks. Right now, I don't think that's going to be workable during the summer. But I think we could do it, schedule a meeting maybe at the end of July, and just concentrate on remote participation and come up with consensus maybe on that. And then we can go to the next one. I mean, that's my gut. I don't know.
Well, you're both the chair and you came up with the idea of doing this. When would you like to meet next and how often?
I think allowing a little bit of time to digest all of those materials that we've dipped into a little bit, I think each of us has, is a good idea. I think it would be good to meet, maybe give it 3 weeks before we have our next meeting.
Yeah.
And then maybe get on I would hope maybe on a regular, if we can do it, a bi-weekly meeting schedule at that point and see where we get. I think remote participation is going to kind of, that's going to be the easiest to plow, I think, because so much work's been done on it already. And we probably all have views on that. Thinking about what we want to accomplish by that. Again, democracy means everybody gets to vote. Do you make better decisions if more people vote? Well, a lot of people voted in Brexit. Was it a good decision? A lot of people regret that.
But it was their decision.
It was their decision. That's right. I will say that personally, I'm not terribly optimistic that enabling people to participate remotely in town meeting is going to dramatically increase our numbers. I think that we are what we are as a civic as a community. And there is that aspect of town meeting that's important to keep in mind. We get people to participate when there's something that gets them upset or they're angry or the disagreement level is high. We had pretty good turnout at the last town meeting at the last election because we had a contested race for school committee. And it was contested not just kind of randomly, but around specific issues. And it really was, I think, to be candid, I think there was a desire for a candidate to run against an incumbent. It was something that the incumbent was doing that wasn't making people happy, and that brought out a vote. And as a result, we had an election at which, by my sort of rough way of evaluating this, at least 150, maybe 200 of the people who showed up at that election were there to vote in the school committee race, and that's it. They didn't vote in the uncontested races. There were blanks. I think that there were a handful of blanks in the school committee race, and there were 150 to 200 blanks in other races. So, and even in sexy issues, and the election for the 3 to 5 vote on the select board size was one of them, as I would characterize as one of the more consequential decisions that the town's made in recent years. And less than 10% of the people bothered to pick up a mail-in ballot and vote in the election. I think a significant portion of our electorate is indifferent. And they're either indifferent because they think things are fine. They're indifferent because whatever the consequences of the decisions might be, they don't feel any impact. Maybe they're people for whom somebody else is paying their real estate taxes. They've got an accountant that takes care of that stuff. They don't even know what it is.
Or it just doesn't matter to them.
It doesn't matter.
Just that difference in their real estate taxes doesn't.
But they think that, the things are fine one way or another. Either I'm indifferent to what happens or I'm happy with what's happening. I'm okay with that. I don't need to go. Personally, my view is that remote participation is going to increase participation in town meeting by maybe 5 to 10% over what we have right now. And that's,
That could be a 50% or 100% increase then.
no, over what we have right now. I think if we get
right now we have like 5%. Say.
I think we'll get 7 or 8%.
Oh, I see.
That's what I'm thinking. It's going to be a marginal.
That would be a 50% increase.
Yeah. No, that's what I was saying.
It might just be that the people who are now calling themselves a town meeting just choose to vote remotely. It might not.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
may.
Well, let's not do the voting at this next meeting. Let's just talk about participation.
We should have a conversation, and not tonight, but at our next meeting, about what do we mean when we talk about this remote thing?
Yeah.
If we just want people to be able to vote, we already get to vote if we're gonna have a Proposition 2.5 override.
Yeah.
Everybody gets to vote at the ballot. And that has to happen. There's no reason why the select board can't subject every budget that comes up to a referendum vote in advance of an advisory referendum vote in advance of the meeting.
Be a real referendum vote, couldn't it?
Well, if you'd have to have it afterwards because the budget might change. We vote the budget. Well, we could.
I mean, between Saturday and Monday, it's the same thing, but I mean, which order he did it in. Oh, we'll talk about this.
So there are ways to just let people vote.
Yeah,
And there are ways to let people participate in the crafting of the decision of the alternative that's being voted on. And maybe we don't care about that part. I care about that part. I think Beth cares about that part. And promote participation and voting in town meeting is kind of where I'm very interested in doing that. Anyway, so next meeting.
do you want to just do it 3 weeks from
3 weeks from tonight.
3 weeks from today? Does that give us enough time if we start at 5, or do you want to start at 4? Or you can have more full discussion?
Well, I was trying to take everybody's needs into consideration. Ron was not during the day, during the week, and I'm not sure when the day ends, Ron. 5 was my attempt to find, or 6. 5 was my.
Fine. If you just plan it in advance, I can do it. What day are we looking at?
It would be sorry.
It's the 20th, if it's 3 weeks from today.
Oh, yes, I know. Yeah.
Can we pencil that in?
4 or 5?
Which day are we saying? Is it the 15th?
Oh, the 20th.
20th.
20th. Sorry, my bad. Fine. 4 o'clock. I have a meeting from 3 to 4, but and I will
It's
I'll
easier
drive over.
4:30 only because it's easier if I can not be too early.
All right, I'm good with 4:30. I'll finish up at 4, drive over. I should get there to this time to meet you guys in person at 4:30 on the 10th. We'll do it.
Will be a hybrid meeting though, right? So I'm not gonna.
We're going to do all of our meetings as hybrid meetings. I mean, we could do meetings that are solely in person, and that would require any member of the public that wanted to join in our meetings to actually come here physically. But I can tell you that there's nobody in the waiting room. Nobody in the waiting
Okay,
room.
so what date?
The 20th of July.
20th at 4:30.
I think you should try to get an article in the Weston Observer about the foundation of the committee and
Good idea.
here. They're always looking for things.
If they are.
And we're going to be reaching out to the community. So we might as well start accustoming the community to our existence.
And yeah, I mean, just,
Are you voluntarily trying it?
oh no, they have,
No, they'll write it.
they'll write it. She'll come, Anson will come. Or
Do you want to pencil in the 2 weeks from that? If you want to start on a 2-week rotation, or even conceptually pencil in every 2 weeks at that time, 1 day. So that would make the next one the 3rd. Or not.
We can, why don't we pencil them in on a bi-weekly basis? We can do that. We can always not have it but if we can put it on our calendars, and if it becomes a problem for somebody, just get back to me. I'll get back. I guess scheduling is something that we can probably all communicate on collectively without getting anybody unhappy with us. But if it's a problem, let us know. We'll work around that. So, at the 20th, then the 3rd, then the 17th. and then the 31st.
Credit all my wedding obligations perfectly.
You're gonna have to skip all these weddings.
Well, one of them's my son, so that won't be happening. He's skipping that one. No, these are all, these dates fall perfectly for those travel obligations to Appalachia to 20.
Wow. How do you?
Yeah.
Hey, Rip, would it be at 4:30, same time, 4:30, the 3rd, starting from the 20th every 2 weeks?
Can we do that? Can you do that? Or is that
Yeah. I just need to know so I can put it into my calendar. That's all.
4:30? 4:30
Fine.
hybrid, this room on all those dates, and we'll stop scheduling beyond that.
Okay.
So we're up to the 31st, I have as our last scheduled date,
Of which,
31st of August, I believe.
When's Labor Day?
Labor Day is
7. The 13th is Rosh Hashanah. That's a wedding now.
Thanks very much. Yeah. Motion to adjourn,
I make motion to adjourn.
Second.
roll call vote, Beth,
Aye.
John,
I,
Ann, John, Ron.
Yep, agreed. Adjourn.
Hey, thanks an awful lot.
No, thank you.
you,
If this seemed disorganized, it's only because the subject is pretty amorphous and